Black lawyer asked to move for VIP passenger moments later. He grounds the entire plane. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. You're in the wrong seat, sir. This section is reserved for premium passengers. The words cut through the quiet hum of the cabin like metal scraping glass. Every head within 3 rows turned, drawn by the sharp tone that didn't match the calm before takeoff. The flight attendant stood poised in her crisp navy uniform, her painted smile trembling between politeness and command. Her manicured finger pointed toward the man in the window seat, a black man in a tailored suit, holding a slim leather briefcase on his lap. He looked up slowly, the kind of movement that says, "I've heard this before." His name was Jordan Miles, corporate lawyer, 38, clean lines, calm voice, eyes like locked steel. He didn't speak right away. The pause stretched just long enough for the air to change temperature. Behind him, a man in a gray suit leaned forward, smirking. "Miss, I believe that's my seat, 2A. Maybe there was a mistake." "There wasn't," Jordan said, still seated. His voice was low, even but carried through the entire cabin. "My boarding pass says 2A. The attendant's smile thinned. "I understand, but this gentleman is a VIP guest of our executive team. If you'd kindly move back to 8C, we'd really appreciate your cooperation." Jordan studied her face, the forced kindness, the flicker of impatience, and then the man behind him, whose confidence smelled like expensive cologne and entitlement. The silence felt alive, vibrating through the recycled air. Somewhere, a champagne flute chimed against a tray. He set his briefcase down gently. "Tell me," he said, "is VIP a title that replaces basic policy now?" The question froze her for a second. The passengers across the aisle exchanged glances, curiosity tangled with discomfort. "Sir," she tried again, softer but firmer. "This isn't personal, it's just procedure." He looked her straight in the eye. "That's what they always say." The words didn't rise in volume, but the weight behind them did. The woman 2 seats ahead turned her phone slightly, recording without shame. The man in 2B adjusted his tie, pretending to read his tablet while sneaking glances. Jordan leaned back, calm as marble. "I'll stay here," he said simply. The attendant's jaw tightened. "I'm going to have to ask you again." "Not this time." That line landed like a verdict. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the whisper spread small, fast, electric. He said no. The word no carried power it wasn't meant to have in that space, a space designed for quiet obedience and hierarchy. The pilot's voice crackled faintly over the intercom. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure." But the cabin wasn't ready. The moment had rewritten the order of things. The attendant exhaled through her nose, masking irritation behind a smile. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." Jordan's gaze didn't waver. "You already did. Sen work pan was in turn while dock works and slashes ravel." She blinked. The man behind him shifted uncomfortably, his smirk faltering. The rest of the passengers avoided eye contact, trapped between tension and curiosity. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. Outside the window, engines roared to life, a low growl beneath the silence inside. The overhead lights flickered once, catching the reflection of his watch, a rare model only corporate insiders recognized. A detail small enough to be missed, but enough to unsettle anyone who noticed. The attendant turned away, whispering into her intercom. The man behind him muttered something under his breath, something about people needing to know their place. Jordan heard it. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The stillness around him was his response, composed, deliberate, unbreakable. From row 5, a teenage girl whispered to her mother, "Why won't he move?" Her mother answered softly, "Because sometimes sitting still is how you stand up." The engines hummed louder, the kind of vibration that lives in your chest. Jordan looked out the window at the runway lights, stretching endlessly into the dark. His reflection met his own gaze steady, patient, ready. He whispered to himself, almost too low to hear, "Let's see how high fairness can fly." And somewhere deep in the plane's circuitry, a different kind of turbulence was already forming, one that wouldn't come from the sky. The flight hadn't moved an inch, but the air inside had changed density, thicker now, heavier, as if dignity itself had weight. The attendant still stood near seat 2, A clutching her tablet like a shield. Behind her, a few passengers whispered in the hush between engine hums. The man in the gray suit, the self-proclaimed VIP, leaned forward again, his tone rehearsed for boardrooms and brunches. "Let's not make this dramatic," he said, his voice polished, almost friendly. "I'm sure he'll cooperate once he understands how things work around here." Jordan didn't turn. He simply said, "Oh, I understand exactly how things work." A couple of passengers stifled nervous laughs. Someone across the aisle coughed, just to break the silence. The attendant forced a brittle smile and murmured into her earpiece. The message traveled down the aisle in a chain of glances from one uniformed attendant to another, until even the captain's door stayed closed longer than it should have. Jordan placed his briefcase upright between his shoes, hands resting on top of it. Every gesture of his was precise, deliberate, a man aware that restraint could be more powerful than reaction. He wasn't angry. Anger would have made them comfortable. He was composed, and that made them nervous. A passenger in 3B whispered, "Why doesn't he just move?" A woman beside him, elegant, mid-50s, answered quietly, "Because she didn't ask," she ordered. That subtle distinction lingered in the air like a scent of ozone before lightning. The attendant cleared her throat. "Sir, if you refuse to comply, we'll have to contact the captain." Jordan met her eyes. "You should." Those two words hit harder than a shout. The flight attendant blinked. She expected protest, maybe outrage, not calm authorization. Her headset crackled as she stepped aside to speak to the cockpit. The man in gray sighed, theatrically rubbing his temple. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, glancing at his watch. "I have meetings in London." Jordan's gaze flicked toward him 1 second. No words, and for that brief moment, the man shifted in his seat as if gravity had increased. Outside the window, rain began to streak across the glass, thin silver veins under the tarmac lights. The world beyond looked blurred, distorted, fitting for a moment when truth itself was out of focus. Jordan exhaled slowly. "Not this time," he repeated under his breath, quieter now, like a prayer. At row 6, a young woman filmed discreetly over her shoulder. The red recording light pulsed in rhythm with the cabin lights, a small digital witness to something that didn't yet have a name. The intercom clicked. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay before takeoff. Please remain seated." Another before follow-away. Whispers rippled through the cabin. "Delay? Already?" A man in first class grumbled about compensation points. Another asked for more champagne. No one realized the delay wasn't about weather, it was about principle. Jordan folded his hands, eyes half closed, as if centering himself before cross-examination. The discipline of stillness ran in his blood, the kind passed down by fathers who endured insults without the luxury of answering back. He remembered his father's voice. "One day, son, they'll ask you to shrink so someone else can feel taller. When that day comes, stand so still, they see themselves fall." Now, 30,000 feet from takeoff, that day had arrived. The attendant returned, pale under perfect makeup. "The captain would like a word with you before departure," she said, managing to sound both polite and afraid. Jordan nodded once. "Of course. Tell him I'm comfortable right here." Her jaw flexed. "Sir," he insists. He tilted his head slightly. "Then he can come here." Gasps scattered across the cabin like dropped marbles. No one ever summoned a pilot, not a passenger. Not like that. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. For a long, suspended moment, the only sound was the rain tapping against the fuselage. Then the door to the cockpit opened. The captain stepped out, tall, composed, and clearly unprepared for the eyes waiting on him. "Mr. Miles?" he began. Jordan looked up. "Captain, I understand there's been a misunderstanding." Jordan's tone stayed neutral. There usually is when courtesy forgets its definition. "They's rum?" The captain hesitated. His gaze flicked from the lawyer to the attendant to the restless VIP. "Perhaps we could resolve this quietly," he said. Jordan's lips curved slightly. "Quiet is exactly what I prefer." He reached for his briefcase, flipped open the silver latch, and pulled out a document folder embossed with the Orion Aviation crest, the very corporation that owned this airline. The embossed seal caught the cabin light. A ripple of recognition spread across the captain's face. "This is my legal clearance," Jordan said calmly, "and your company's Code of Conduct, Section 12. You may want to read the clause on discriminatory seating procedures." The captain's color drained. The attendant took a step back. Even the VIP leaned away, as if from heat. Jordan placed the document flat on the tray table, his movements steady, surgical. "Now," he said softly, "do you still want me to move?" No one answered. The engines idled in silence, rain whispering its applause against the windows. Outside, the runway lights blinked, patiently waiting, like everyone else, for permission to move forward. For a few long seconds, no one in the cabin breathed. The engines hummed beneath them, restrained power waiting for direction. The captain stared at the document in front of him, embossed, official, undeniable. His throat moved once before he spoke. "Mr. Miles," he said carefully, "perhaps we can, clear this up privately." Jordan didn't look away. "The misunderstanding wasn't private," he replied. "Neither should be the correction." A quiet gasp rippled through the rows. The attendant's knuckles whitened around her tablet. The VIP shifted again, his confidence thinning into irritation. "Look," he said, trying to inject charm into authority, "no one's questioning your position. Let's just be reasonable. I'm expected to be in London by morning." Jordan turned his gaze toward him, calm and exact. "Then I suggest you start adjusting your expectations." It wasn't a threat, it was a sentence. The captain's earpiece crackled faintly. He pressed a finger to it, listening, eyes darting toward the cockpit. Something in his jaw tightened. "We've received instructions," he said slowly. "Ground control wants us to hold position." The words floated across the air like a verdict, too soft for most to process at first. Then the meaning hit. The plane wasn't moving. "What?" the man in gray blurted. "You can't be serious." Jordan stayed silent. His stillness had become the loudest presence on board. At row 5, the woman with the phone whispered to no one in particular. He stopped the flight. She didn't know how right she was. The attendant's eyes darted between the captain and Jordan, panic flickering behind professionalism. "Sir, may I speak to you outside the cabin?" she asked. Jordan's tone was mild. "You already are," the captain sighed. "Mr. Miles, this delay is going to cause significant inconvenience." "So does prejudice," Jordan said quietly, "and yet it happens every day." The captain looked away first. The passengers were divided between awe and unease. A few glanced toward Jordan with something new in their eyes, not curiosity, not pity, but respect. Others shifted uncomfortably, unsure which side of history their silence would place them on. Jordan leaned back again, folding his hands, his voice calm but cutting. "You run an airline, Captain. You understand turbulence. Some storms don't come from the sky." Outside, rain pounded harder, the world beyond the windows fading into streaks of gray. Inside, the air smelled faintly of tension and cold metal. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. The pilot stepped back toward the cockpit, murmuring something into his mic. The attendant lingered, her voice now barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean any harm," she said. Jordan's gaze softened slightly, but his tone remained steady. "Harm isn't always meant, it's just always felt." She swallowed hard, eyes glassy with realization. In row 7, someone clapped, once hesitant, uncertain, then stopped. The sound vanished into the hum of the engines, but its echo stayed. Jordan looked out the window again. The runway lights reflected in his eyes like distant stars. "Grounded," he murmured, half to himself. "Good. Maybe that's where we start fixing things." The captain's voice came over the intercom, measured but thin. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an internal review, this flight will remain grounded until further notice. We appreciate your patience." Gasps. Murmurs. The man in gray slumped back, disbelief etched across his face. Jordan closed his briefcase. He wasn't smiling. Justice didn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looked like stillness, perfectly executed. Outside, thunder rolled far off in the distance, but inside, the storm had already happened. The plane sat motionless on the tarmac, engines idling in frustrated silence. Raindrops slid down the oval windows, glowing gold under the runway lights like slow-moving tears. Passengers murmured in fragments, half confusion, half fear, while Jordan Miles remained completely still. He was the eye of the storm he'd just created. No one in that cabin yet understood who he really was. To them, he was just another well-dressed passenger with an attitude problem. What they couldn't see was the lifetime that had built that calm, the discipline, the fury wrapped in silk. Jordan had grown up on the south side of Atlanta, the son of a maintenance technician who spent 30 years repairing aircraft engines without ever once setting foot in first class. His father, Samuel Miles, used to come home with grease under his nails and stories he pretended were funny about being mistaken for janitorial staff. Even when he wore his company badge, about accidental demotions when promotions were due. He never complained. He simply taught his son how to survive it. "Power isn't about volume, Jay," he'd said once, wiping oil from his hands. "It's about what you can stop with a whisper." Jordan had listened, and he had turned that whisper into law. After graduating top of his class from Harvard Law, he entered the one arena where justice could be both weapon and shield: corporate aviation litigation. The irony wasn't lost on him. The boy who once watched his father get escorted off a hangar floor now rewrote the contracts that governed the entire industry. Over 15 years, he'd earned a reputation no one challenged. He was the quiet architect behind the Equal Air Act, the legislation that forced airlines to disclose every discrimination complaint to federal auditors. He'd advised 3 governments, dismantled 2 monopolies, and most relevant tonight served as chief legal counsel for Orion Aviation Group, the parent company of the very airline now sitting motionless beneath him. And though few people knew it, he also owned a 2.5% equity stake in Orion, enough to authorize a full safety and conduct audit of any flight under its brand. In other words, when Jordan said ground the plane, it wasn't a metaphor. It was policy. He glanced at his reflection in the window. Dark suit, calm eyes, the faint glow of runway lights tracing the outline of a man who had outgrown apology. Somewhere deep inside, the boy who used to wait outside, locked hangar doors, finally exhaled. A soft vibration buzzed against his wrist. His smartwatch lit up. Rachel Kim, legal ops. He tapped once to answer, voice barely above a whisper. "Rachel," her voice came through, crisp, professional. "Sir," confirmation received. "Flight 278 is under immediate review. Ground control logged it as compliance investigation per Article 12C. "Good," he said. "Make sure the internal record notes the trigger phrase, discriminatory reassignment. No ambiguity." "Already filed," she replied. "Do you want media containment?" He paused, watching a droplet race down the glass. "No. Let them film. Truth travels faster than damage control." He ended the call before anyone noticed, slipping the device back under his cuff. The woman across the aisle, a journalist, judging by her press badge half tucked into her purse, had her phone halfway raised. Their eyes met. She froze, then lowered it. Jordan gave her a slow, almost imperceptible nod, granting silent permission. From the cockpit, the captain's voice returned, this time tinged with resignation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Please remain seated while we resolve an operational matter." Translation: the lawyer owns the sky right now. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. He closed his eyes for a moment, replaying the timeline in his mind. Less than 20 minutes ago, he'd boarded quietly, expecting nothing more than a transatlantic nap and an early morning deposition. He'd chosen the aisle seat for convenience, not power. Yet somehow, life had found a way to remind him that history wasn't done testing his composure. He thought of his father again, all of the old man's hands trembling when the layoff letter arrived. Terminated without severance after 30 years, because automation made the role redundant. That letter had been signed by the same airline group, whose logo now gleamed on the bulkhead ahead. That memory sharpened his calm into precision. He wasn't angry for himself anymore. He was furious for every person who had ever been told to move, to wait, to know their place. He opened his laptop, fingers gliding over keys with surgical rhythm. On his screen appeared a secured document template. Notice of Conduct Review, Flight 278 Orion Air. One line blinked at the top. Filed by J. Miles, Chief Legal Counsel, Corporate Ethics Division. He typed 3 words in the comments section. Respect delayed. Correction initiated. The plane shook slightly as the auxiliary power shifted, lights dimming to standby. The captain's voice, tight and rehearsed, echoed once more. Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you this flight will not depart tonight. Arrangements are being made for alternate travel. Groans filled the air, followed by sighs, frustration, confusion. Jordan simply closed the laptop, locked it, and rested his hand on the briefcase. The mission was already complete. For years, he'd been the man behind the curtain. Tonight, he'd become the curtain, drawing a line no one could cross without seeing themselves. Somewhere near the back, the young girl who had spoken earlier whispered again, "Mom, why isn't he mad?" Her mother smiled faintly. "Because he's already won." Jordan didn't hear them, but the truth of it hung in the air like cabin mist, weightless yet undeniable. The engines cooled. The lights dimmed. Justice for once was on the ground, where everyone could see it. The cabin lights dimmed to amber, washing every surface in a tired glow. The engines no longer hummed, they breathed, slow and restless, like a restrained animal. Passengers murmured to one another, voices weaving confusion and irritation into a quiet storm. But at the center of it all, Jordan Miles sat motionless, one hand resting on the briefcase that had just rewritten the flight plan. He'd spent his life orchestrating order from chaos. Now chaos was listening. A flight supervisor boarded through the front galley, her ID badge glinting beneath the soft light. She was older, efficient, radiating the clipped authority of someone used to putting out fires until she saw who the fire was. "Mr. Miles," she began carefully, "I'm told you initiated an internal audit? Was as bad mine." Jordan nodded once. "Correct. Section 12C of Orion's Code, breach of discriminatory conduct." She hesitated. "Sir, this could ground the flight for hours." "Then you'd better start the clock," he replied. Her gaze flicked toward the captain standing behind her, his cap in hand, his pride somewhere near his shoes. "Captain Lewis has requested a resolution that allows us to depart without escalation," she said. Jordan's eyes lifted from the briefcase, cold but polite. "Without escalation? You asked a paying passenger to surrender his seat for a so-called VIP. The escalation already happened. I'm just documenting it." Her throat tightened. "Understood." He gestured toward the attendant, the same one who had delivered the insult. She stood stiffly near the galley, her posture a fragile apology. "Was this your decision?" he asked. Her lips parted, but no words came. The supervisor stepped in. "Sir, let's keep this procedural." "Exactly," Jordan said softly. "Procedural." He reached into his briefcase, retrieved a slim folder, and opened it with deliberate care. Inside were printed policies, each section highlighted, signed by executives who thought rules only existed for other people. He slid the papers across the fold-out tray. Article 7, subsection D. Any staff directive resulting in discriminatory reassignment or public embarrassment of a customer is grounds for disciplinary review and potential contract suspension. The captain cleared his throat. "Mr. Miles, are you implying we violated that clause?" Jordan's gaze was steady. "I'm not implying. I'm confirming." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he added, almost kindly, "You have 2 choices. File it as a system error and let the matter dissolve quietly, or acknowledge what happened, accept the review, and correct it properly. One protects image. The other restores integrity." The supervisor's breath caught. "And if we refuse?" Jordan closed the folder. "Then this flight doesn't leave the ground, and neither does your next paycheck." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now back to Jordan. The man in the gray suit, the so-called VIP, finally broke his silence. "This is absurd," he barked. You can't hold an entire aircraft hostage over hurt feelings. Jordan turned his head slowly, as though examining a noise he'd already dismissed. You're not being detained, sir. You're being educated. Gasps fluttered through the cabin like ripples across water. The man flushed. Do you have any idea who I am? Jordan smiled faintly. Do you? The captain stepped forward again, lowering his voice. Mr. Miles, perhaps we could… Jordan raised a hand, cutting through his sentence without effort. No need for persuasion, Captain. You'll receive instructions from Orion Corporate within the next 5 minutes. The captain frowned. Instructions? Jordan tapped his watch twice. Check your comms. The captain's earpiece crackled alive. He turned slightly, listening. The color drained from his face. Control just confirmed a directive from headquarters, he muttered. All flight operations for this aircraft are suspended pending legal clearance. Murmurs swept through the rows. Legal clearance? Corporate directive? Words that sounded too big for a delay and too calm for disaster. The supervisor looked at Jordan as if seeing him for the first time. Who exactly are you? She whispered. He leaned back, voice smooth as glass. The person who makes sure this airline remembers what fairness costs. Then, slowly, he opened his laptop again. The screen glowed with an active document feed, an encrypted corporate dashboard titled Operational Conduct Review Portal. At the top, his name flashed in digital blue. Authorized access, J. Miles, Chief Legal Officer, Orion Aviation Group. The captain stared. The attendant covered her mouth. Even the man in gray had nothing left to say. Jordan typed one line into the system. Flight grounded, pending ethics verification. Then, without looking up, he said, You may inform your passengers they're free to disembark. This aircraft won't move until policy does. The supervisor took a step back, almost reverent. Understood, sir. She turned to the intercom, her voice shaking slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, due to unforeseen operational procedures, this flight will be delayed indefinitely. Please gather your belongings. The cabin came alive with motion sighs, whispers, confusion. But through it all, Jordan sat still, composed, as if this entire event were unfolding according to an invisible script only he had read. As passengers filed past, the man in gray lingered. You'll regret this, he spat quietly. Jordan's tone never changed. Regret is for those who lose control of their story. The man blinked, unsure whether it was insult or wisdom, then stormed off the plane. Jordan closed his laptop, stood, and straightened his jacket. The briefcase clicked shut like a gavel. Justice didn't roar tonight. It didn't shout, threaten, or perform. It simply grounded the plane and everyone who thought they could rise above accountability. Outside, the rain had softened to a silver mist, curling against the airplane windows like breath on glass. The engines had gone silent. The cabin, once a theater of tension, was now a courtroom without a jury. Every passenger who remained sat hushed, watching Jordan Miles pack his briefcase with the precision of a surgeon closing a final stitch. The captain lingered near the galley, his authority quietly unraveling. Mr. Miles, he said finally, voice low but sincere. I've flown for 23 years. I've seen angry passengers, entitled passengers, but I've never seen someone stop an aircraft with a conversation. Jordan looked up, his expression neutral. That's because most conversations aren't about principle, Captain. They're about permission. The captain nodded slowly, shame flickering behind professionalism. For what it's worth, he said, you're right. You can giant over. A was not a wid. Jordan's gaze softened. Being right isn't the point. Being seen is. He extended a hand. The captain hesitated, then shook it not as a superior greeting a subordinate, but as a man acknowledging another's gravity. The flight supervisor reappeared, holding a digital tablet. Corporate has requested your signature on the suspension notice, she said. Standard procedure, sir. He took the tablet, scanning the document once before signing with a fluid gesture. The system chirped softly confirmation. Effective immediately, the supervisor read aloud. Flight 278 is grounded pending investigation of discriminatory passenger treatment. Her voice trembled slightly at the last word. Discriminatory, a term that turned protocols into headlines. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. Jordan handed the tablet back. That's one flight, he said. Now send the same report to HR with the attendant's name omitted. This isn't about punishment, it's about proof. The supervisor blinked, surprised. You're not pressing charges? No, he said simply. People make mistakes. Systems repeat them. From a few seats away, the attendant, the one who had started it all, stood frozen. Her eyes were wet, her lips trembling around an apology she couldn't form. Jordan caught her glance. You'll learn from this, he said quietly. Just promise me you'll never look at someone and see inconvenience before you see humanity. She nodded once, almost a bow, then turned away. The passengers began to disembark in silence. No chatter, no grumbling, only the sound of rain and rubber wheels rolling down the aisle. One by one, they passed him. Some gave small nods. A woman in business attire whispered, "Thank you," a teenager murmured, "Respect." When the last passenger was gone, the cabin felt like the echo of a sermon, still vibrating with truth long after the voice had faded. Jordan walked toward the exit. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, a gust of cool night air met him, real air, unfiltered, sharp with rain and freedom. His phone buzzed again. A message from Rachel Kim. Media's picked it up. Number grounded by justice is trending. Orion HQ wants your statement. He typed back. No statement. The action spoke. He slid the phone into his pocket and kept walking. The city lights shimmered beyond the runway like distant applause. Behind him, ground crew surrounded the idle jet, a monument to silence, policy, and consequence. For the first time that night, Jordan allowed himself a small smile. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't threatened. He had simply done what his father once told him to do, stop something wrong with a whisper. And tonight, the whisper had grounded a plane. By dawn, the storm outside had cleared, but the one inside the industry had just begun. The footage, captured by half a dozen passengers, hit the internet before sunrise. 12 million views in 6 hours. A black man refusing to move. A pilot grounded mid-flight prep. A hashtag rising like smoke. Number grounded by justice. The video didn't show shouting or chaos, just stillness. Calm power. A man who didn't raise his voice, but raised the standard. And that somehow made it impossible to ignore. By noon, news anchors were debating it. Was it justified? Did the airline overreact? Who is Jordan Miles? They didn't know that while they were talking, Jordan was already in his office at Orion Aviation's glass headquarters, 52 floors above the same runway he'd frozen the night before. He stood at the window, watching planes take off one by one, steel birds soaring under policies he'd written, rules he'd defended, and now, a new precedent he'd just set. His assistant, Rachel Kim, entered, tablet in hand. "You've seen this?" she asked, tilting the screen toward him. He glanced a split-screen montage, his face, calm and steady on the plane, beside headlines that screamed, "Black lawyer grounds flight over bias." "Yes," he said quietly. "And you've seen the comments?" Rachel nodded. 80% supportive, 20% angry. But the angry ones are loud. Jordan gave a small, knowing smile. "They always are." She hesitated. "The board wants a statement, something diplomatic." He turned back to the window. "Tell them silence is my statement. Let the footage speak. People don't need explanations. They need reflection." Rachel studied him for a moment. "They're calling you the man who stopped the sky." He almost laughed. "Then maybe they'll remember to look up differently." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. Outside his office, the world was shifting. Overnight, 2 airlines announced emergency diversity reviews. Unions began drafting new crew training mandates. Civil rights attorneys quoted his name in interviews. And somewhere deep in Orion's PR department, a handful of executives whispered what no one dared say aloud. He didn't just ground a plane. He grounded our hierarchy. The airline released an official apology before the day ended, not just to him, but to every passenger who has ever been asked to move for someone else's comfort. It was the first time that sentence had ever appeared in corporate language. Jordan didn't celebrate. He simply forwarded the statement to his father's old email address, inactive for years, and whispered, "We fixed the altitude, Dad." By evening, the hashtags had evolved into a movement. Travelers shared their own stories under the same banner. One woman wrote, I used to think staying quiet kept the peace. Now I see it only kept the pattern. Another added, he didn't fight. He just refused to move, and somehow, that moved the world. They all find a passus is not rum. Jordan read a few, closed the screen, and leaned back in his chair. The sun dipped below the horizon, scattering light across the skyline. Planes kept lifting into the orange dusk, each one carrying a new kind of awareness. He smiled faintly. Grounded by justice, he murmured, tasting the phrase. Not bad for a day's work. Outside, a departing jet thundered past the window. But this time, the sky didn't just sound like freedom. It sounded like equality taking flight. A week later, the sky over Atlanta gleamed spotless, not a single cloud, just endless blue stretched like a promise. Inside the glass tower of Orion Aviation headquarters, the boardroom buzzed with an unease too polished to be called panic. Executives in tailored suits whispered behind stainless steel water bottles, their voices low, their sentences careful. At the head of the table sat Jordan Miles, calm, unbothered, reviewing a document stamped, Corporate Governance Revisions, Immediate Implementation. The same airline that had tried to move him now moved at his command. The chairman, a silver-haired man with the permanent look of someone allergic to discomfort, cleared his throat. Mr. Miles, he began, we've reviewed your recommendations. Comprehensive, yes, but rather he searched for the word disruptive. Jordan looked up, eyes steady. Change always is. A few nervous chuckles skated across the room. He continued, voice measured. You all watched the footage. You saw what happened when company policy met human dignity and lost. So here's what we're going to do. Not for optics, for legacy. He tapped the screen. A new presentation flickered to life. The Skywrights Initiative. Every word was sharp, clean, inevitable. 1. Mandatory equity and ethics training for all flight and ground staff, no exceptions. 2. Anonymous discrimination reporting system, directly monitored by the legal division, not HR. 3. Immediate termination of VIP displacement privileges. 4. Creation of a public restitution fund for passengers wronged, silenced, or humiliated by the same system that had humiliated his father. Silence followed. Only the soft hum of the projector dared move. The chairman adjusted his cufflinks. Jordan, this goes beyond compliance. You're rewriting our culture. That's the point, Jordan said. Compliance doesn't change behavior. Culture does. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. A younger executive, eager, fearful, leaned forward. But sir, the board will ask about financial cost. The restitution fund alone. Jordan cut him off gently. The cost of dignity is less than the price of discrimination. The line landed like a verdict. No one argued. By the end of the meeting, the motion passed unanimously. Skywrights Initiative effective immediately. As the board members filed out, the chairman lingered. You know, he said quietly, I misjudged you, Miles. I thought you were making a point. Jordan gathered his files, his tone calm but cutting. I wasn't making a point. I was correcting the course. That evening, he stood again at his office window, watching another jet ascend into the clouds. For years, those machines had symbolized power he didn't yet have. Now they symbolized something different. Accountability carried at 30,000 feet. Rachel entered, holding a sealed envelope. It came this morning, she said. Jordan opened it, a formal letter bearing Orion's crest. Appointment confirmation. Chief Legal Officer, Orion Aviation Group. He smiled faintly. They finally made it official. Rachel nodded. You earned it. He placed the letter down beside his father's old wrench, a relic from the hangar days, still carrying the smell of oil and aluminum. No, he said softly. He did. They stood in silence, the city glowing beneath them, the hum of distant engines echoing through the glass. By morning, news broke that Orion had become the first airline group in history to implement a zero-tolerance discrimination clause backed by an independent legal fund. Stockholders didn't panic. They celebrated. The company's valuation jumped 8% overnight. Investors called it the ethics effect. As they gooding, in Chicago, an elderly maintenance worker paused mid-shift to read the headline. The name Miles caught his eye. He smiled to himself, whispered, That's Samuel's boy. and kept working. Across social media, the hashtag evolved again from number grounded by justice to number sky rights, a movement no longer about one man's defiance, but an entire system's reckoning. And while interviews flooded his inbox, Jordan declined them all. He didn't need airtime. The policy spoke louder than any soundbite ever could. That night, as he packed for his next trip economy seat, by choice he paused at the door, phone buzzing with one last notification. Orion Flight 278 reinstated. Captain Lewis requests your presence for takeoff ceremony. Jordan smiled, slipping the phone into his pocket. Some flights, he murmured, deserve a second chance. And severed descends of braces and braces 5, and might too enter. He looked out over the city, the runways glowing like veins of light, the skyline breathing in rhythm with engines he no longer feared. This time, he wasn't boarding as a passenger. He was boarding as the man who had taught the sky a new rule. Fairness flies first. The sun rose over the runway like a slow applause, gold spilling across the wings of Flight 278, the same aircraft that had once been grounded in silence. But today, the silence felt different, cleansed, earned. Jordan Miles stood at the gate, dressed simply in a charcoal suit, no entourage, no press. The crew greeted him with genuine warmth, this time not performance, but presence. The same attendant who had once asked him to move approached quietly, eyes glassy with humility. "Mr. Miles," she said softly, "we wanted to thank you. The new training starts today. I'm one of the instructors." Jordan smiled. "Good. Teach them to see, not to assume." She nodded. "I will." As he stepped on board, passengers turned, some recognizing him, some simply sensing that calm gravity that draws attention without asking for it. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. Today's flight holds a special meaning. We're proud to fly under new company ethics standards, inspired by one of our own." The cabin broke into soft applause. Jordan didn't move. He just looked out the window, hands folded, eyes distant as if watching his father's shadow in the clouds above. When the plane began to taxi, the engines hummed with the sound of renewal. He thought of everything that had unfolded, the humiliation, the stillness, the reversal, the movement that followed. And now, the flight. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. At 30,000 feet, the world looked fragile and infinite. Below, cities glittered like constellations, pretending to be stars. Jordan closed his eyes and remembered his father's voice. "Power isn't how high you climb, son. It's what you lift while you're up there." He smiled faintly. The plane leveled, smooth and steady, as if the sky itself acknowledged the shift. A little girl across the aisle, maybe 8 years old, leaned toward him. "Mister, are you the man who stopped the plane?" He chuckled softly. "I didn't stop it," he said. "I just helped it start over." She grinned, satisfied with the answer, and went back to her coloring book. Through the window, sunlight burst across the clouds, dazzling and endless. For the first time in a long time, Jordan felt peace. Not victory, not pride, just peace. Below him, policy had changed. Minds were changing. And somewhere on the ground, a mechanic named Samuel's legacy was still working not in the engines of airplanes, but in the engines of people. When the captain's voice returned, "Prepare for landing," Jordan exhaled, slow and content. The sky had tested him. He hadn't shouted, fought, or cursed. He'd simply stayed seated. The wheels touched the runway with a whisper, smooth as truth landing in its rightful place. He gathered his briefcase and stood, pausing for a moment in the aisle that had once been a battleground. "Dignity doesn't need permission," he said under his breath. And as he stepped off the plane, the applause began again, quiet at first, then rising like the sound of justice learning to breathe at 30,000 feet.